And we are live. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Happy New
Happy
Year,
New
guys.
Year.
Happy New
Happy
Year.
2022. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, what a great rollicking start we've got off to.
What do you mean? You're in the bin.
Yeah. Well, that's better. And today, John Stewart remembered that when he first saw the Harry Potter film 20 years ago, he was shocked at the anti-Semitism. He was so shocked, he felt like pointing at the screen and going, oh! Then he waits 20 years to bring it up. What another disappointing fraud. It drives me nuts. These people are without any honor. Anyway.
But it's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? That I haven't seen Chris Columbus get it in the neck, who actually produced the films.
And directed the
that's
two,
good. That's a very good point. Yes, Chris. Did you know? Actually, here's my story. I went onto the set of the first Harry Potter film. I was invited. Yeah, I was invited by one of a lovely producer who was involved. Wouldn't happen now, of course. But
Why?
And I was brought on a tour around. I went down all the streets. I saw all the magical things, and I met the young traitor who would grow up to become Daniel Radcliffe and betray the woman who made him famous. And he did an impression of Father Jack for me.
Oh, that's so cute.
Which Chris Columbus
was it shit?
So I want to make it. I want to make it very clear. I'm not accusing Chris Columbus of anything, are we? We are saying, why wasn't this brought up?
Exactly.
The director of the film. It's just perfect. Anyway, listen, I'm not a really good person at this type of thing, so I've not really done my job. How was your Christmas? Artie, how was yours?
Sorry, my Christmas was very nice. It was very chill. Were you in Wales, Helen?
I went to Wales just before Christmas, which was lovely. Because I got to see my dad, and I stayed in a place with a hot tub, so that was fun.
Oh,
outside in the cold, and then I was here. For Christmas. But Graham, did you have COVID over Christmas?
I did. I had a spot of COVID, which was unpleasant, and but fine. But fine in the end. Went away. I'm checking okay now. So. Yeah, I'm a bit bored talking about COVID. When you have it, I was suddenly like looking it up, which I haven't done for the whole length of the thing because I couldn't give a fuck. I'm like, what can I do if the government want to kill me or track me? I really don't care. I just want to know what to do and then get on with fighting this stuff.
You're 2 years later, you're like, what COVID? What is this?
Yeah, exactly. But then, and then, so okay, that's enough small talk.
Yeah, enough small talk. Let's get on to the list.
Yes. What do we talk about first? There's some great stuff this week.
The list, I think, is quite interesting, isn't it?
Oh, the pedal bin list. Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, quite frankly, like Owen Jones, the thing that gets me most is not that you're in the bin, but that Owen Jones is on a pedestal. Because honestly, he's like anyone who's going to say, I'm going to hold up Owen Jones on a pedestal is either doing it because they want to be viewed as on the right side of history or because they particularly enjoy the sort of unpleasant bullying type of style that Owen Jones has and poor arguments. I can't think that there's anything that anyone can say there. Like Owen Jones made a really good point here. He was really articulate and he was absolutely spot on. And kind and compassionate, and this is the sort of person you should hold up on a pedestal in making decent arguments. I mean,
can we explain what this list is? What is this list?
Oh yeah, sorry, Artie. Sorry. The comedian Stuart Lee did a hilarious list of all the things he did and didn't like a 12-year-old girl might. And he published it online. And I was in the bin, again, after never having spoken to him about this issue, because he's a coward who would never phone me or email me, even though he has my details. Because I know he has my details, because after you know, as he slags off people who are on Twitter from the stage, for years he was asking me to promote his gigs using my Twitter feed. And there's a very funny detail someone told me. Sorry, do I sound obsessed? People send me this stuff, and you can't help but enjoy it. But there's a very funny detail someone told me that he just sent out a mail out for his new shows, and the thing he's included as a quote says, "There's no one else to touch him." You know, he puts that in the trailer for his show. And who wrote that? Someone at the Mail on Sunday. And the Mail is in his bin list. The Times also hyped him hugely, which is maybe why they escaped the bin, despite the fact that they are fully behind, well, not fully, but not solely, but very, very much behind the increased scrutiny that that gender ideology has been under for the last year. You know, the Times
I think you.
So he left him off because he wants to get good reviews from the Times. You know.
But I think you make a good point about him not having spoken to you. You know, if he does personally kind of know you, and if he really cared about this issue, really wanted to, you know, try and help heal it or fix it or sort of find a resolution or even understand the arguments before, like, putting you in the bin on the list, he would have, I would have thought, sort of spoken to you. But again, you know, Owen Jones here, Graham down here, it seems very much like a look, don't cancel me, I'm all good type of move, doesn't it? It doesn't really strike me as being anything
It's
but
also,
cynical.
oh yeah, but also it's very sneaky as well, because he's kind of saluting the flag without actually saying any of the points that they're like. For instance, you know, he'd rather stab himself in the eye than talk about vulnerable women in prison being placed with male sex offenders, because he knows that he and Owen Jones are absolutely betraying the most vulnerable women in society with their stance. So he can't even say it out loud. He can't even say trans rights or human rights or any of that bogus stuff, probably because he knows it's a bogus line. He has to just put Joyle and Mom, Owen Jones.
I'd forgotten about Mom as well.
Yeah.
Oh God,
Oh
yes.
God.
I mean, you couldn't be more
and Nimco
obviously.
Ali.
Yeah. Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yes, that is true.
You
Well,
know?
it just sounds like pointless virtues. Like, there was a time when I thought everything on the left was great and everything on the right was terrible. That time is long gone, and I think
Yes.
most people are waking up to that now. That we're sort of, it's post left right now. The left has gone mad, the right's gone mad. You really have to look at individual issues for what they are and pick them, because you can't just like you said, salute the flag, join what team, and just assume that everything on your team is great and everything on the other team is not great. We're long past that. People like Owen Jones are exactly the people who ruined the left, you know.
Yeah.
And Jolly on Mom, who's just capitalizing on people's naivety. He's obviously just capitalizing on leftist fears and tropes, you know, for money. It's just so ridiculous.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, I think he's just, there's a few people on that side who I just think are very stupid. And I think Joylin is very stupid.
I think there's a personal connection in there. And I think we've said many times before that having that personal connection will make people argue things that they would never argue if they didn't have it. And
yes,
and it might mean that they've really thought the issue through more than other people and truly believe it. But most of the time, I think they're trying to shoehorn the arguments in to support a position that they've already taken, because they can't, you know, they can't see another way out. So I think that there's a lot of sort of motivated speech being done there by Mom, but in a terrible way, in a way that he knows is affecting women, but he's doing it regardless. I mean, I think he's also highly cynical and has walked into this issue because he's got a personal connection, but he's seen how much it's getting him in woke points, and he's absolutely capitalizing on it.
I think that's kind of what I mean. I think there's some people in this who just haven't thought about it a lot, just haven't thought about it carefully. And bizarrely, like, some of them are in very important positions. Like Nancy Kelly is a great example. Like, for someone like Nancy Kelly to come in and call lesbians sexual racists because they won't sleep with men, how is she still in her job? How? You know, that is someone who has never really thought carefully about this issue, about how it affects lesbians. Never, you know. And suddenly they're on
God,
TV.
you should like
and
imagine
they're
if she
saying it
was
for
the
the
head of a
first
gay
time.
rights organization. That would be horrible, wouldn't it?
It's just unbelievable. I mean, it's just such a funny time to be alive in some way. Sometimes you really can only laugh, you know. Like I saw something the other day that that kind of reminded me of the gender fight. Okay, bear with me now. What it was, right? Fish tank with a goldfish in it that's attached to some sort of sensors, and the fish tank is moving around. It's in like on a street. It's going down the street. The fish is going down the street, right? And I saw this kind of, someone tweeted it and said, "Look at this incredible thing. The fish is moving around down the street, you know." And then someone pointed out to me, the fish is just trying to find the corner of the glass. They're just trying to escape. And I thought, oh yeah, of course. Why would a fish want to go anywhere in real life? You know, even if it could, what would it like? I'll go to the shops. I'll go down this road. It's not thinking that. But I thought it for a second because it was online. It was presented as a scientific thing. And that's the position we're in more and more. And I think that we should talk about Getter soon, because one of the things that I think is going to happen with Getter, if it keeps growing the way it is, and this is, sorry, for people who don't know, this is a new social media site that at the moment is kind of inhabited by many right-wing Americans. But I think it could provide a alternative to Twitter simply because, you know, for a start, feminists should get on there. I think that like feminists should get on there because most feminists, as we know, are left-wing. You know, you don't become a feminist. You don't give yourself the name feminist unless you have a left-wing background for the most part, you know? And if they kind of get onto Getter, it could become a space, as I was saying myself, like my Substack, where I don't have to lie. I can use like real pronouns. I can talk about the problem without confusing people. I just think that it might be a useful service. Yeah.
Yeah, I've joined it. I mean, it seems worth joining, just, you know, to start connecting with people for, you know, for when the inevitable happens and we're banned off Twitter again. So yes, yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think everyone should, if they want to, they should certainly sort of check it out and get a profile, because it works in exactly the same way.
Yeah. And look at this. I love things like this. This is the way they try and kind of shame you off it, you know. But it's but I'm afraid, you know, you guys believe that men are women, and that's a kind of a right-wing view. It kind of benefits.
I mean, it makes no sense to. Like that kind of thing makes no sense now. I mean, anyway, look, yes. You know, that what's his name? That Tom Howard chap.
Yes.
On GB News. I mean, what is he? Is he conservative? He's certainly right wing, and yes. He is all over. You know, trans women are women. Oh, you're being really horrible and rude. Kelly J is on fire all week, isn't she? She's been like taking down these chaps with very, very. Just plain speaking, saying about men, and and it was really interesting. I mean, there's so much to say about it, but I think one of the main things is that the main charge against her from two blokes is it's unpleasant, I'm shocked, it's rude, and that's the level of argument that they have, which is no argument at all, and it has to resort to I can't believe that you're saying this. You should be cancelled.
I know, yeah.
Rude. There's no argument there. You know, and she's just gone on and just been sort of very plainly spoken to them, not in the least bit rude. Although I think especially the first chap, I can't even remember his name now. It was like a flash in the pan. These guys' names come up, and then we throw them for like a week just replying to them, and then we forget who they are.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think it feels to me like there's a slight change in the air, because I'm seeing more and more of these positions actually being expressed, and I always thought that was going to be a good moment, because as we know, the part of the problem with this movement is that they cannot really engage with the issue. They can't engage with any aspect of the issue, and so Kelly being on TV more often really helps that. you know. And I hope they continue to bring people like her on. And I saw some of our guests have been on. It's been brilliant, you know.
Yes, I think having somebody plainly say, well, actually, I prefer to use these terms. You know, I prefer to use the term man or male. I think it gives people a license to look around. It is basically going on TV and saying, no, the emperor is naked. And it's been disallowed for so long. I mean, it's disallowed on Twitter, isn't it? It's been disallowed for so long that people have been frightened of saying it.
Yeah,
but just having somebody who is, clearly an intelligent, reasonable woman just going on and saying, no, actually, it's a real, I think it's a way for people to say, actually, maybe it is okay to say it. You know, she came across fine, didn't she? She certainly didn't come across as bigoted or unpleasant or rude in any way. She just came across as rational in the face of these men just say, I mean, that bloke from GB News, the first one, he literally said, well, maybe you should be cancelled. Isn't it the home of free speech? Oh, no, that was Talk Radio. He said, well, maybe you should be cancelled when he had no argument. Yeah, it was the most incredible, I'm going to say it for the first time. It was the most astonishing first time this year. It was the most astonishing thing to say. Openly, brazenly.
Have you seen these, Artie? Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh.
You've muted yourself, Artie. Use it.
Oh, sorry, I'm yammering away. Like,
sorry.
No, I haven't seen, but I've heard about. But GB News is an interesting one because it's sort of the land of supposedly free speech, and even it has problems. But it's still such a small channel compared. You know, we need to have this stuff happening on mainstream channels. People should be able to use whatever pronouns they want on the BBC, on Channel 4 or whatever the hell you've got in the UK. Like, it's just unbelievable and frustrating that even you have to create these alternative sort of Twitter clones to be able to talk freely. You have to have these new alternative news stations. I mean, GB News seems to be growing pretty well. It sounds like it's not tiny anymore. Yeah.
But may I say something on that point, Artie? That's kind of why I brought up the fish in the tank, right? Yeah. Like, I would like someone. I used to think Snopes was the people who did this, but then they went down the gender road as well. Snopes used to be
crazy.
Snopes used to be, if you wanted to find out whether something was true or not, you went to Snopes, right? But then once they started lying about this issue, I realized, oh shit, I can't trust Snopes. So it's not so much that I'm not even sure maybe Getter will only survive a couple of months or a month or two or something like that. But what I think is important is to try and normalize the idea of telling the truth on whatever platform it happens to be. Mm-hmm. You know, so telling the truth is now a kind of radical act. You know, I've had my life fucking destroyed by it. You know what I mean? It's like a radical thing to tell the truth. And so like Joe Rogan went over, took a lot of people over with him. Can you imagine what will happen if Trump goes over? If Trump has been looking for a way to type out his insane tweets since he got banned off Twitter. If he gets on this, it's going to bring most of Twitter's user base. That's why Twitter had him. Yeah, Twitter had him.
Hasn't everyone forgotten about Trump now? We've all moved on.
Nobody cares. He's in the running. Take my word for it, guys. Trump could win in a couple of years. He could win. You know, like the thing is that there's it's gone from being the right as a kind of a completely crazy, bigoted, intolerant, sexist, organization, that Trump kind of was like the ultimate expression of all that. And yet they're still going to lose. The left are still going to lose because as they admit themselves, the sports issue is looking so fucking terrible for them. Someone said every time a Democrat stands up for a ban winning a women's sport, we lose 10 Senate seats. You know, so really.
Well, maybe they've got 4 years, or maybe was it 3 years, 3.5 years, to realize this. I mean, that would obviously be the preferred solution. That they just realize it. Well, that's great then, isn't it? Because maybe the midterms will be where they think, right, we have to do something. And honestly, what do they have to do? Not very much. They have to say, yes, people should have rights. However, we can see in these small areas that there are some conflicts. Let's go with this. Let's find a nice compromise, which is let women have their own sports. We can keep men's open. We can start new leagues. We can do all sorts of things. That's all they need to do. They just need to think through a few different solutions rather than saying, women, you bigoted witches, move over. That's it.
How long is it going to be? Do you think 3 years is enough for people to wake up and figure this out? It's so not difficult. You just need to have a single conversation with people. Yeah, in Canada. Oh my God. Yeah.
But the fact that it isn't. Sorry, Artie. The fact that it is actually, you could find solutions. You could have found solutions. Everyone could have found solutions a long time ago. And the fact that we haven't, I think, is quite a telling point here, isn't it? There is an underlying massive amount of misogyny here that is perpetuating it, because there's clearly an enjoyment part there, the power play, the ability to say to women, no, you are bigoted witches in public and be lauded for it is, I mean, I can't help thinking that this is now almost the main reason for it perpetuating, because the solutions aren't that difficult. They're not.
Yeah, it's very true.
And the media has a big responsibility. People don't hear about this issue enough because the mainstream media won't touch it. The New York Times, the BBC, all these people, if they're not going to talk about it openly, nobody's going to. People think it's not an issue that's in the zeitgeist. And what you have is people talking about it privately and just choosing to, to speak with their votes. There really is becoming an issue where people are alienated by the left because this issue is festering. People see that it isn't a problem. They see that the left won't talk about it, and they don't trust the left anymore as a result. Yeah.
Not only that, but the BBC, it's taken a highly ideological position on all of this. There's even though, a lot of people wouldn't have an experience of a trans person in their life unless, they see it in such a context. But on pottery programs, at bake-off type programs, there's always a trans representative. And the thing that annoys me about it is that it's as if the debate has already been had and settled, and it hasn't. What does trans mean? Do you know what I mean? Is it people who suffer from dysphoria or not? Is it transsexuals or not?
Nobody knows. Is it? Who was that? I think it was on your Substack, Graham. There was that child molester. There's a guy who was sexually abusing girls who was on probation or parole or something, whose gender identity is like a 5-year-old girl. He sucks on a pacifier and he wears pigtails and he dresses like a little girl. And the judge and the court were referring to him as she. So I guess that's what trans is. That's a valid gender identity.
Exactly. Yes. It's like,
why would a single person he's sexually abusing children and he's dressing up like a child? How is that transgender? How are judges and the media being like, yes, we better use this person's preferred pronouns? Like, what the fuck, Yeah. Unbelievable.
Like someone pointed out that the recent changes in the press, the judge's guide over here, which tells judges how to deal with transgender issues, they said it's actually a little bit better because they don't force victims of rape to call their attacker she, but everyone else in the court will. Everyone else in the court will act as if this is an example of female on female violence. It is the most traumatizing, insulting thing you can do, and it doesn't just insult and traumatize the victim. It insults and traumatizes all victims who hear about it.
It does.
It doesn't just insult them. It insults all women.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Yes. When your argument is something like, well, cis women rape too, you've really got to wonder, what is it that you're trying to achieve here? If that's what you have resorted to arguing, what are you actually trying to achieve? Whatever it is, it ain't good.
Yeah. It is. These are also MRA arguments. I heard these same arguments during Gamergate. They're exactly the same.
So much.
And the reason why sometimes some people get angry because they were affected badly by Gamergate, please understand, I'm not saying Gamergate was in any way a good thing. I do think at its heart it was a a hate campaign. But I do think there was also in there a bunch of people who thought it was more of a protest against the way games companies were bamboozling consumers. Okay, there was a little bit of that in there, but the biggest thing about Gamergate was that it was full of people on both sides pretending to be the opposite sex. On the Gamergate side, you had all these people, like, for instance, there was a famous one where they pretended to be black women. This was the right who did this. They pretended to be black women, and they ran a hashtag called End Father's Day, because Father's Day, they were pretending they believed that Father's Day was sexist. And they were doing that to undermine the other side, right? But then on the other side, you had men being harassed and abused, but they were calling them women. Like, there were a few women I defended, and I realized, hang on a sec, this is a bloke.
Yeah, there's that bloke that I came across like a couple of years ago, or maybe even longer ago, called Secret Gamer Girl.
Yeah, Secret Gamer Girl.
And he says he's like this big fucking bloke with a beard.
Yeah, I think he's done the thing they do now, and he's careful now when he gets photographed to put a bit of makeup on.
But he's still, but he does identify as a woman, and people are like, they're calling him she. It is obviously insane.
So that's
where we are now.
But I think that this fight, like the way you said, Archie, that and Helen, the old divisions don't exist anymore, right? What there are now, I think, is there are a group of people who understand the internet, understand how it works, understand how to gain power through the internet. That's why I sometimes call this a white power, call gender identity a white power movement, because it's like it mainly benefits white men, right? Straight white men are the ones who benefit most from gender identity ideology. That's a white power movement. Do you know what I mean?
So it's certainly gaming the system, yeah. Like they see that there's a sort of new movement where we're trying to correct past injustices, and we're trying to sort of rebalance the power dynamics of society with things like, with all of these sort of movements, isms. But it's so easy to game it. It's so easy. If you say that there's this one class of people that's the most vulnerable of all, and it's free entry into that class of people, all you have to do is declare that you're part of it. People who are seeing their power erode are very, very sensitive to the fact that their power is eroding. I'm talking about straight white men. And they're looking for a way to get back on top, and they're seeing that we're rebalancing structures on the left. So they're going to grab at it. They're going to say, oh, all I have to do is say, and they don't even have to do it themselves. They don't have to declare that their pronouns are she, her. They just have to defend everybody else who does. Yeah. If they see that there are men, they're going to defend those men. I have never seen straight white men more passionate about an injustice the way they are about men.
I know. Or in fact, women's rights. Women's rights. Look at these most vulnerable women in society. It's so glaring, isn't it? It's so glaring that we've been pointing it out for the last sort of 5 years that these men are just coming in on their white horses, knowing exactly which women they are defending. How can they tell?
It's impossible to tell.
It's hard. I mean, I saw an excellent tweet earlier, which I retweeted. I won't say their name in case they get a pile on, but it was a reply to somebody arguing to me that communal changing rooms just shouldn't exist, and how terrible it was that I was prepared to take kids into change, in communal changing rooms. And really, really arguing like to the nth degree about it. And this lady replied, "You're fighting really hard to argue the absurd and ignore the obvious." And I think it's such a good description of the arguments that people are making, tying themselves up in knots to pretend that biological sex doesn't exist, and that women's sports, that sex is a continuum, and that there is, how can you possibly tell who is a man and who is a woman, whilst also saying to women, oh, but be nice to these women. It's really, I thought it was such a great comment, fighting really hard to argue the absurd and ignoring the obvious, which is that women have been oppressed, and women clearly need spaces. They clearly need spaces because they're clearly smaller and more vulnerable. we have been throughout history being oppressed and violated, and our bodies are uniquely vulnerable to the bodies of men. It's just the most it's incredible arguments, but I thought it summed it up very well.
Yeah, there's this attitude that to acknowledge the existence of sex differences is somehow parallel to saying that there are racial differences. It's somehow like eugenics or something like that. I think people are taking the model of anti-racism, which is that we're trying to say there are no differences, no matter what your racial background is, your ethnicity is. And they're trying to somehow apply that template onto sex. It doesn't work that way, because sex, there are differences and you have to acknowledge them. And people don't understand that. People think that it's more progressive to say that all humans are exactly alike, regardless of any of these issues, regardless of your sexual orientation, your race, your sex, your blah, 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 but that's not how it works. Sex is irrelevant in a lot of contexts, but it's extremely relevant in others. You have to understand that sometimes you have to acknowledge sex differences. In order for real equality, you have to acknowledge that there are differences between male and female bodies. You can't just pretend that there aren't, Yeah,
but people have, I mean, this is again out of the Denton's document, and we saw something about it. Was it I can't remember. I'll have to find the link to it. Was it a law firm or some trans rights organization had done a survey on men in women's sports and said, this is so unpopular. This is an incredibly unpopular issue. And they were talking about hitching it onto a more popular reform, always talking it in terms of a more popular reform like gay rights. And and I noticed sort of
forced teaming
Tom Howard saying exactly the same thing. Somebody asking about men in sort of women's spaces, and or it was about schools, wasn't it? And he was beginning to argue along the lines of how ridiculous do you check people's genitals in school? The most absurd argument. And then somebody sort of said, don't you think that girls should be allowed to have, single sex education? And he replies with, do you think, imagine if you changed this and spoke about it in terms of gay people or in terms of race. And you have to say, and if somebody was asking that question, you might have a point, but they're not. They're asking this question, and it is in fact a different question. And the fact that you felt the need to reply with a question and using a completely different question, in fact, shows that you understand that your actual argument isn't strong enough to stand up on its own, and you need to try and prop it up with something that we all agree on.
Yeah. It's like when people say, imagine if you said that about gay people, gender dysphoria is a mental illness. Yes, it is. Imagine if you said that about gay people, that wouldn't be right. Well, being gay isn't a mental illness. They're two different things, Gender dysphoria is a mental illness because it's a mental illness. Homosexuality is not a mental illness because it's not a mental illness. You can't just make one comparison and swap it out with the other, They're two different things. Yeah, it's so strange.
But that's what this whole thing is based on. I mean, that's another reason why I sometimes look more critically at Gamergate. Like, I remember one of my major kind of tactics when I was in Gamergate. I wouldn't call it a tactic. It was just something I believed in my absolute core, right? Which was when anyone ever wrote to me and said, I'm very confused about Gamergate, I don't really know what it is, I used to reply, it's very simple. It's a misogynistic right-wing hate campaign. That's all it is, right? And it was that kind of thinking that led me into overreacting to Count Dankula as well, and not being not really thinking rationally about these things, because I now realize that the left are involved in a kind of a here's the best example. J.K. Rowling as a bigot is the most extraordinary bit of mass brainwashing that the left has ever done. There's nothing behind it. But there are all these people like Jon Stewart, now, who said that who suddenly realized that that goblins are Jews, 25 years after the film was out. They just kind of add layers to this figure of hate. They add another layer of paint to it. And I now realize, oh shit, maybe that was happening during Gamergate. Maybe that was happening during climate conversations. Maybe that was happening during everything that I've always thought was absolutely central to, my belief system, or whatever you would call it. How sure am I that everything I've been told is true? If John Ronson, right, who I would have trusted entirely before this all happened, if John Ronson can do a program on Mitchfest and not mention the fact that it ended because 2 lesbian women were killed by one of the people at Camp Trans and their child, if he can be a revisionist by making a careful omission like that one, then what else have we been lied to about? And that's why, we should get on Getter and we should have these conversations and we should try to figure out what the truth is. I don't think it'll be made easier by Getter. I think, in fact, what it'll probably do is create another tiered reality, another level reality that will never.
Yeah, I'm afraid there is a happy medium, isn't there, of what you are allowed to say to people on a public platform, and and I think the idea of moderation is a good one in principle, but it depends entirely on the political motivations of the moderation, isn't it? I mean, as we've seen on Twitter, like rank misogyny is often left unchecked, whereas
it's an ideological position on the platform.
Can I just say to Mr. Blobby in the comments saying this is bollocks, may I suggest you don't waste an hour of your time listening to it then and leave?
Yeah, there's a few in. If people want me to get rid of these people, then let me know.
I can do it. Who is this person, Mr. Blobby?
Yeah, he's gone.
Yes.
I've got
he's gone now.
Block a few of these people. Anyone who writes my name at the end of sentences usually trolling. Right.
Talking of revisionist, you said something about revisionism there.
My last tiny thing to say about
go.
Like the fish in the. I think we should call this show "The Fish in the fucking the fish walking down the street." We need to know what's true. And if John Ronson is going to lie to us, and if people on the right and left are going to lie to us, then we will never know what's true, and it's going to lead to a huge breakdown in society. There's no way.
This isn't one small thing. It's like division by zero. If you put a division by zero anywhere in a massive equation, the whole equation becomes nonsense. Reality has to be real. You can't even have one example where you just pretend reality isn't real.
Yeah, exactly.
This one's particularly toxic because you can't even say that it's a fiction. You
can't even say that it exists. You can't even say that it exists. Sorry, Helen, I cut across you originally there. I just want to go back to you.
It's fine. Actually, it's a really good point. I mean, it's at the root of a lot of this, isn't it? I mean, I was reading that Scott Alexander's Slate Star Codex article again that I think he wrote back in like 2014 or so about boundaries. And about dolphins being fish, whales, and he's very much on. I mean, he's a really very, very smart chap, like member of the rational, less wrong community, and yet again, I think there's some political motivation there, suggesting that we should just be nice and be kind, and if somebody was identifying as Napoleon in order to make their lives easier, if that's all they wanted to do is wear a tri-cornered hat, then we should pretend that they are Napoleon, but completely missing the point that if he wanted to go and reenact the Battle of Waterloo, we should not actually affirm his delusions in being Napoleon. And there were quite a lot of replies. It's a good article. Everyone should go and read it. That community was good, and there were a lot of very excellent replies to this, sort of saying the same thing. That it's not a zero effort, or it's not a zero risk to affirm to make everyone in society lie. It's a really, really difficult thing, and it's a huge ask on people because there are huge amount of quite possibly in the beginning unintended consequences, but we can see these consequences now. That are, none of these consequences are unintended anymore. We can see what's happened, even if at the beginning people were like, okay, let's just say it, because what harm can there be? We've seen what the harm is, and yet people are still continuing to say to women, be nice, be kind, just do this, you bigots, you horrible, and then it escalates to like that chap on talk radio saying, I'm so shocked, you should be cancelled. Maybe you should be cancelled.
Can I say something?
So it starts with, can I just Ustamont and Bailey, which I think was also popularized by Slate Star Codex. First, they say it's just a word. You can call a male who identifies as trans a woman because you're just offering the word woman as a courtesy. This is how it starts. And then you forget that you were only just offering this sort of fiction as a courtesy. And then it turns into, oh yeah, of course you can play in women's sports. It's no longer just a word. Now it's being treated literally. So when you create this fiction and you sort of all lie together that a trans woman is a woman, you forget that you were lying. You forget it was just supposed to be a word. It was just supposed to be a courtesy. It was just supposed to be being nice to use a word. And then you start saying, oh, of course you can go into women's spaces. Of course you can go into women's sports. Of course, everybody by law has to affirm that you're a woman. This kind of nonsense. It's people forget that it was all just it was just supposed to be a courtesy to begin with.
That's right. And then you get tweets like I saw one today. I mean, it has been ratioed to all fuck, to be fair. It says, when Boy George came on the music scene in the 1980s, everyone assumed that he was a woman. Ditto for Marilyn, another cultural iconic figure. They both reveled in the ambiguity. People seem to be more accepting then on certain issues. Anti-trans activism want to micromanage society. And we're like, literally no one, not one person ever thought that Boy George was a woman. Like, this is completely untrue.
We did. Me and my friends at school. We were confused for a while. We didn't know what was going on.
He's literally called himself Boy George.
Yeah, but then we thought that was a double bluff.
That's funny.
I don't know. Someone said, Artie, Artie. Well, sorry, that's one for you, Artie. Well, no, someone just brought up Debbie Hayton. And the thing is, I always call Debbie he and him when I'm talking about Debbie, because I know that at this point in time, certainly, those courtesies are actually too dangerous to observe. And Debbie understands that as well, and is always absolutely fine with me doing so. So I just want to say that on that's where I stand with it. There was something else I wanted to talk to you about as well. Do you think, does it feel slightly different? It feels a bit different to me. Artie, maybe not to you. You're in such a different position. But over here, I feel like something is breaking. I feel like
that way looking at the media in the UK, that the media is just sort of talking openly about this. Here, I think it's changing a little bit in that we're at the phase where people realize that there is an issue, but there's just so much fear. North America in general is just more religious in its way of thinking, and this is very much a religious kind of issue. We adhere to taboos in North America more than you do in the UK. We don't like to rock the boat. It's a lot more politically polarized, so this is a left-right issue, a red state, blue state kind of thing, and all of this is even more extreme in Canada because Canadians are so passive and we don't like to rock the boat. We don't like to be controversial. I think in Canada, the big problem is that this is controversial. It's kind of an ugly issue, and Canadians don't like ugly issues that involve a lot of conflict. So Canadians just keep their heads down and go along with whatever makes people feel comfortable. And Americans, this is a left-right issue. This is, there's such polarization between the Republicans and the Democrats. Things have there's just no discussion between these two sides. They're so far apart. And people on the left feel like if they don't agree with gender identity ideology, they're going to be completely politically homeless. And it's so frightening to be politically homeless in a country like the United States where there's no social safety net. It's just so scary. You have to stick with your crowd, with your tribe, or you end up, you could be completely cast out of society in the United States or something. It feels that way sometimes. So I think Americans are scared to rock the boat. They're scared to leave their tribe of the left. And in Canada, we're just scared to rock the boat because we don't like conflict.
I feel also that another sign that we're doing well is that some of the divisions that have kind of already been there for a while, that we were kind of that we kind of suffered through before Christmas. I think we all felt that. I think it's part of the reason is because we're now beginning to push at an open door, and there's a little bit of positioning going on. There's a lot of anger that's been bubbling away for a while and is now boiling. And it did lead me to, I don't want to talk about the actual issues there on the show, but it did make me think that maybe our little show is I don't know, maybe we will look out of place if we're still trying to be light and airy and keep things keep things nice, when everyone else is demanding that we take very rigorous positions. I've kind of ambushed you with this. I didn't really know I would say it myself, but I hope it's okay to just delve into this a little bit. It was troubling me before Christmas because there was so much pain and anger and sadness, and it was very hard to talk about, and it was it just kind of it just felt like not our show suddenly, and I just wonder whether is it something that we need to think about in terms of strategically or tactically. Is there a point where we go, you know what, the time for our show was there, but maybe it's becoming a different time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you might be right. Have we said everything that needs to be said? Maybe. I mean, we've made the points. I do think that we have decent guests on, and the guests that we have often have some great insights. Things happen. But yeah. I mean, you might be right.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people. I think we're platforming a lot of really extraordinary, interesting people. And I don't think this issue is going away anytime soon. I mean, sometimes we repeat ourselves making the same points, but it's got to be, these points have to be repeated because there's so much to be remembered. You can't just say things once and assume it's done. You have to repeat your points because people have to hear them to get them in their head.
I think something that we might overlook sort of sitting here is that it is a space for people to come together and talk as well.
Mm-hmm.
The way that StreamYard works is very good. I noticed that a lot of commentators, they talk to us, they talk to each other. It's a place to come to just have a bit of a breather, to be able to say things that you might not be able to say on Twitter, sort of the normality of being able to say, actually, no, this is wrong. So there's that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought it might be. I certainly don't want to, come to any hard and fast decisions. And loads of people are writing very nice things in the comments, which makes me think we should go on, because if people still love it, then why would you stop? And also, I think today, like we've only covered today stuff that happened in the last 3 or 4 days. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about. But I just hope that, I'll give you an example. I'll just give one last example before we go on. But someone else just said there, people are ignoring that Hayden uses women's spaces. And that's not true either.
That's not true.
People are spreading lies about this.
This is a real problem. I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot of great stuff going on in the gender critical movement, but there's a small group of people who are causing serious problems. And I think there's a sort of defensiveness where people don't want to address the problems within the movement. I think a strong movement is a movement that says, yes, we have a good cause, we're united in it, but also isn't afraid to call out the problems within its movement. The gay rights movement had to do that. They were pedophiles infiltrating the movement. And they were fighting HIV, they were fighting massive discrimination, but they were also able to look in themselves and say, okay, we do have some problems within our movement. And there are some problems, and there's an instinct to kind of be defensive and to not want to say that there's a problem because, we have a cause that matters. But there are some people who behave pretty badly,
But there's also a problem, I think, with calling this a movement. It isn't really a united movement. You've got feminists who have very, very maybe different goals to maybe some men who might be in the movement who agree. There are definitely some right-wingers who certainly agree on some parts of it, who I actually, but I would absolutely go tooth and nail against in terms of abortion. So I think that there is maybe a problem in expecting everyone to be able to play nicely and get on, because this is a massive, diverse group of people, and people do have different goals. And I think as more and more people begin to realize what's going on. Because don't forget, this really started, like a decade ago with radical feminists. That's the root of this movement. But radical feminists aren't necessarily the gender critical movement at all. Radical feminists have goals, and they have insights, and they have seen things, and they have raised this issue. But there's loads of people who absolutely are not radical feminists who simply agree on this. So I do think that there's a danger in saying, well, let's call this out.
Yeah. Well, I think it's true. We could say, okay, it's not necessarily a united movement, but within people who have the united cause of wanting to put an end to gender identity ideology, I still see that there are people who agree, who are are united with us in that they have that shared goal. And when they behave badly, other people who have that shared goal kind of go out of their way to not call it out. So there is a sense that, okay, sure, we're not part of the same movement, but there's a lot of people getting sort of mulligans.
But there is a little bit more to it as well. I think there is a lot of people who feel the same way I think I do often, which is I don't want to I don't want to make any kind of comment at all, because the reaction is so terrifying and so powerful, and so not so much that people are giving approval of some of this stuff. Some people are just scared and they don't want to talk about it. There's a lot of different people with different reasons for behaving in different ways. A lot of pain out there.
Well, that's kind of like, it's a reflection in any social movement, right? Because that's how people feel about the gender debate at large. People who aren't in this don't want to get in this because they get called out. So you see kind of echoes on all sides. You sort of, the social media creates certain kinds of patterns of behavior, certain kinds of patterns of systems. And, it happens on all sides. It doesn't matter.
But it also brings together disparate people. I've met some people that I would never have met, that I disagree with on many issues, but I actually have found some common ground on other issues. And I think that that's probably a good thing.
I think so too. But it's telling that we have to sort of
But there are some people, they might be saying some things that I don't necessarily agree with, or that I think it's not really much to do with me. If they have this opinion on something, I'm not going to say to them, you can't talk about this because you're my friend in this area. I'm just going to let them say what they want to say, and whoever they speak to, you might see a conversation develop. But if I feel that I don't really have much to offer them, I'm just going to say, well, I don't agree with them on this, but I'm not necessarily going to wade in and say, I disagree with you on this. I'm just going to fire it away as, okay, well, that was interesting. I don't necessarily agree with them. And let's see, maybe I'll unfollow them at some point, and maybe I won't.
Yeah, there's a massive diversity. I've met more people from across the political spectrum and with different viewpoints being involved in this than I have ever in my life, which is great. Like, I'm not saying everything's bad. I'm just saying everything's great, but there's a small thing that's bad, and sometimes even talking about a small thing that's bad makes people very defensive and want to remind everyone that there's all this good stuff. And it's like, of course there's all this good stuff, but there's a little bit of bad stuff too. And it's okay to talk about that, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when there's certain things that we can all agree that are, just not the way to engage anyone else in this kind of conversation. I saw on my site a trans widow insulting another trans widow, victim blaming her. I can't have that, I can't have stuff like that, So it's kind of, I don't know. I think, my question about the future of the show is slightly based on that. I just worry a little bit that people are going to entrench themselves a bit more, that the conversation might get more toxic, and if it does, it's going to be very hard to fight against that, it's going to be very hard because our show, despite what it's about, it's quite light, it's kind of a charming chat, really, rather than any kind of serious kind of, and if it comes to a stage where it starts getting too painful to do, then we're probably going to have a conversation. But at the moment, I'm still happy to go on. I'm still really happy that so many people, are kind of encouraging us to go on. So, I'm happy to keep going for a while at least. Sorry, that's a very middle of the road thing.
Well, we've got some good guests, I think, already coming up. So,
Oh, I forgot. Yes, we can't let them down. That's one thing, we've got some good people, and we've got Who's coming up soon? Lisa Lippman. We have.
Lisa Lippman's coming up. It's going to be great. Yeah.
That's going to be brilliant.
That's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Really,
and I'm hoping
really.
And maybe someone could ask Rosie Kay if she's up for chatting now. It's been a while, so it'd be lovely to talk to her about what it's like to be a choreographer and try and remember everyone's pronouns. That'd be fantastic. Oh yeah, there's a person who's been in the chat who's like this guy who did who's kind of obsessed with me from Cooked and Bombed, the website. Yeah, have a look at his Lost Prophets routine. I'll post that. We'll post that in the things below. This is someone who comes after Helen, but thinks we need to forgive the lead singer of the Lost Prophets for some reason. Anyway, lovely to talk to you guys. Brilliant show. Let's. I forget I said anything.
All right, well, happy New Year, everyone, and happy New Year,
Christmas.
everyone in the comments. It's been lovely to see you, even the trolls. I mean, it's quite interesting to see the poor quality of their arguments.
Thank you so much, guys. I will see you next week.
Okay, bye guys. Bye.